Expedition Everest is one of the most fascinating roller coasters I've ever ridden. I've had a passion for this ride since before I even rode it. I have been fortunate enough to have grown up around Disneyland, so I've been going to that park for a long time. So obviously I became a Disney fan, and growing up as a Disney fan, I knew about Disney World and Expedition Everest. And as a kid, that ride was just fascinating to me, just to watch videos of it. It was like mind-blowing how many sets and effects and just the sheer scale of that ride is just spectacular. I actually visited Walt Disney World when I was a kid, but I was too scared to ride Everest, so I did not get to experience it at that time. But I did get to visit Florida again in 2018, 2020, and in 2021. And on all three of those trips, I got one day at Animal Kingdom, and I got to ride Everest on all three of those days. Despite the popularity of the ride and the lack of attractions at Animal Kingdom, I got 3 rides in all 3 years, so I've been on the roller coaster 9 times so far. Everest has a really solid case as one of the best themed roller coasters in the world. It absolutely dominates the corner of the park that it is in. You can see it from everywhere pretty much. It's just a beautiful piece of the Animal Kingdom skyline, and it's pretty iconic. That bridge truss lift hill is just, it's very eye-catching. The queue line is very well themed. It's themed to a museum, so there are plenty of artifacts, including evidence of the existence of a Yeti, which is pretty cool. Nice little foreshadowing. It's very well done. I've only waited in that line a couple of times because Everest does have a single rider line, which I would recommend using if you are looking for re-rides on Everest, which of course I am because I love this ride. Once you enter the station, you will be assigned a row. You can request a row. I have never done that though. I have ridden towards the front and towards the back, but never the exact front or the exact back. The trains are really well designed. They're like steam engine trains. You can't really tell that from the front of the train, but the back of the train is pretty well themed. It's a really nice design. One thing that is a little strange about these trains is the fact that the seat back is kind of angled backwards. It feels a little weird to lie back on it. Like if you lie all the way back on it, then you'll be leaning back, but it's like curved, so it feels really unnatural. But if you're just sitting up normally, then only your lower back will be supported. It really only bothered me in the station. Once the ride experience started, I didn't think about it, and it did not impact the actual ride at all. It's just something that's a little bizarre when you first sit down. Another thing I should discuss right now is the smoothness of this ride. I truly believe that there are no smooth Disney roller coasters. All of them have a pretty noticeable rattle. It's not terrible and it doesn't ruin the ride experience for any of the rides, but they're just cycled and abused so much on a daily basis year round that they get worn down. And Everest is not the exception. There is an exception in another park, which I will discuss another day. Everest does have a slight rattle, especially during the high intensity points, which we will discuss later. Once you dispatch, you roll out of the station, you hit a right-hand turn, and you hit the first lift hill, which is very small. It does give you a nice view of the big drop and the waterfall right next to it, though, so that's really nice. After that lift hill, you turn left, and you go all the way around until you reach the bottom of the second lift hill. This one is much longer, and it has that truss, which is visually stunning. It's very cool. You also go through this little, I don't even know what to call it. It's like a mini temple. It's pretty cool, and it's very unique and iconic, and I have vivid memories of watching the POV of this ride and just seeing how it connects like that. It's really pretty. It's super cool. I can't think of another ride that does something like that off the top of my head. When you reach the mountaintop, it's pretty obvious when you're actually up there that they use forced perspective, which is a little lame, but it's okay. You go into like a little snow valley and then you turn left, and that is when you hit the broken tracks. This might be one of the most iconic theme park images of all time. It's super cool. I love the hawk on a stick. I've actually seen that effect only working a couple times, but when it works, it's actually pretty cool. I really like that thing. And of course, you have the view. You can see Spaceship Earth if you're towards the front of the train. It's a very well done section of the ride, and it's iconic for a reason. When I watched the POV of this ride as a kid, that was always like a highlight. And on ride, it is very cool. But from my experience, there have been like a ton of hairbands on both sides of the trains. I don't know why that is, but from all my rides, I just remember it being kind of filthy up there. I don't know why they don't clean it often, or maybe they do clean it often and it just gets replenished on a daily basis. This might be one of the most ridden attractions in the world. I wouldn't be surprised. The capacity throughput is just really impressive, which is why the standby wait time is actually relatively short most of the time. If you just download the Walt Disney World app, you can usually check it. And comparing it to Flight of Passage, it's usually not that bad, which is pretty surprising because I would argue that this is a signature attraction of the park. It was the big addition before Pandora, even if it was like a decade beforehand. Back on track, no pun intended. You hit the backwards section and you roll away from the broken track, back down over a track switch, which switch behind you, and you go into the darkness. Here you actually hit a helix, which is actually pretty intense. That really surprised me on my first ride. You just get pushed down, slammed into your seat, and it's pretty crazy. I mean, there's some pretty impressive forces in there. The beginning of this backwards helix is actually the most intense part, so it kind of comes out of nowhere. So kind of prepare yourself for that if you aren't a big fan of intensity. Also, this moment, it should be in complete darkness, but I do have memories of being able to spot like a light on and being able to see like a support column, which is really weird. That isn't a problem I've ever had on any other Disney ride, so it's just kind of strange that I've had that happen on multiple occasions on Everest. So I don't know why it's not completely pitch black in there, so that is a little strange, but that is a total nitpick. Eventually you'll see daylight again, but you're going to be moving away from it, and then you're going to stop as the track switches in front of you and you watch a video clip of the shadow of the Yeti breaking more track. I feel like this is another iconic image of the ride, but you know, I could say that about everything because I watched that POV so many times when I was a kid. I was like, this is honestly, even though it was on the opposite side of the country from me growing up, this ride is a major reason for why I am a coaster enthusiast today. It was just inspiring, and it fascinated me as a kid, and the fact that I got to ride it and I got to ride it multiple times across multiple years, I feel so blessed. It was truly special. It was an incredible experience getting to ride this ride for the first time. I could say that about so many coasters though. But this one in particular did have a big impact on me. It made a huge impression on me as a kid. Once the clip is done playing, you're going to roll forward, and that is when you get your on-ride picture and you go down the big drop. Aside from the lift hill, this is really the only part of the ride that's visible from the park, which is super cool. It's crazy how much they hide in that mountain. It's so impressive. The landscaping and just the sheer scale of that ride, and the fact that the lift hill and the drop are the only things that you can see from the park is just mind-blowing. It's incredible, the presentation of this ride. And usually the dispatch intervals line up pretty well so that when you see a train disappear up the lift hill, then not too long after that you'll see a train drop, or like around the same time, which is pretty cool. I love rides that have kinetic energy, and Everest has the trains and of course the waterfall, so that's just spectacular. But as for the on-ride experience, this is a second point of really high intensity. When you hit the bottom of that drop and you curve left back up into the mountain, that's pretty fascinating. So again, you will have to deal with the rattle. If you're sitting towards the front of the train, I've never gotten a front row ride on Everest, unfortunately, but I did get second row. If you're in towards the front, then the rattle will be minimized, but anywhere else it's going to be noticeable. It's not painful or anything, but I would describe it as noticeable. Like it definitely impacts the ride experience. It doesn't bother me necessarily though. Of course, there is no airtime on that drop because it is it's a family thrill coaster, I would say, but it's not the most thrilling. It wasn't built to have airtime, is what I should say. So after you get a nice dose of positive G's, you curve back up into the mountain, and this element is actually pretty interesting. From the POVs I watched as a kid, it was hard to tell what happened inside that mountain afterwards, but riding it as a coaster enthusiast, I figured out it's kind of a twisted airtime hill, like an off-axis airtime hill, similar to Railblazer and Wonder Woman Golden Lasso coaster. Of course, you don't get airtime on it, but it's just the way it's profiled is very similar, so I thought that was super interesting. But the first half of the element is visible, and the second half, where it switches direction and drops back down, that is inside the mountain. So I just thought that was totally interesting. So once you're done with that element, you're going to be on the other side of the mountain, and this is where you hit that really cool spiraling helix. This is a really fun element. You go all the way around once, and then once you start to curve up to go back into the mountain, you get some really solid positive G's. That rattle is there, but it doesn't bother me. It's also visually stunning, that helix, the way it curves up into itself. I think it's visually satisfying, and you can see it from the lift hill, which is pretty interesting. Sometimes if you get lucky with your timing and the dispatch intervals, then you can see a train go through it as you're going up, which is cool. But sometimes when you're on the lift hill, it can be a little distracting. You have a really nice view of Animal Kingdom as a whole, and you can see Hollywood Studios and Epcot from up there, which is fascinating. Once you're back inside the mountain, you're going to hit a mid-course brake run. It does not slow you down, except for 1 out of my 9 rides, it did bring me to a stop. So that was not great, but it only happened once, and I've gotten to ride this ride quite a bit. So it's not that big of an issue, but if you do get unlucky, like sometimes that happens on Incredicoaster where they stack and it impacts the ride experience. I hope when you get to ride this attraction, or if you have ridden this attraction, I hope that did not happen to you. Because right after that is the famous Yeti. All the videos I watched as a kid, it looked pretty convincing, even though it didn't move. I mean, it was pretty hard to tell back then. The quality of on-ride POVs has significantly gone up since then. But my first impression after riding it for the first time was that it was much easier to tell that the Yeti was frozen in person than it was on video. So if it looks fine on video, then it looks less fine when you're actually on the ride. However, on my Row 2 ride that I got, that was actually the most recent, in 2021, the most recent year that I got to ride Everest. I thought that the illusion of movement was the most effective towards the front. I don't know if that's because my vision has gotten worse over the years, or if that's actually the case. You also get pretty close to him in the front, so that can be a little intimidating, which is totally cool. After that encounter, you hit the final brake run, and that is Expedition Everest, an absolutely incredible ride experience. This is one of my favorite rides in all of Walt Disney World, and this ride combined with Flight of Passage makes Animal Kingdom absolutely stacked. Even though it doesn't have that many rides, the top tier and the overall quality of attractions at Animal Kingdom is just mind-blowing. Expedition Everest is just such a complete experience. As a coaster enthusiast, it has really solid forces, plus the inciting incident of the attraction is a really well-themed backward section with that broken track. I just love that track. It's so cool. And as a Disney fan, this ride is so well themed. It's so impressive. It was the most expensive roller coaster ever built for a really long time, and it is so cool. Since then, Cosmic Rewind has opened, and it is now the king for the most expensive roller coaster ever built. Unfortunately, I have not gotten the chance to have ridden Cosmic Rewind yet, but as of now, Expedition Everest is my favorite roller coaster in all of Walt Disney World. It is such a spectacular experience. It is so well done, and I'm really excited for the next time I get to ride it. And that is all for this review, so thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you later.